Hey, we've got a problem here.
So, what's the plan?
What's your plan?
What are your plans?
What's the plan?
What's the plan?
What's your plan?
What's your plan of action?
Plan.
What's the plan?
So, what is the plan?
Wait, I have a plan.
I have a plan.
I have a plan.
That's the plan.
I have a plan here.
This plan's gonna work. Master plan, phase 1, side A.
I love everything about your plan.
भाई इससे कहते हैं planning.
What's it say?
It says, I love it when a plan comes together.
Hello everyone and welcome to Young Australians Plan for the Planet. My name is Jessie and we have with us today as well Ian, as always. We're coming to you live from Questacon. Now today we're going to be doing a session Building the Plan Part 2, but as we like to call it, we're heading towards the finishing line, and that is the theme for today's session. Now we have a lot of exciting things lined up today and we'll get to those in just a second, but before we start, we'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, the first innovators of this land. Today we especially recognise the elders of tomorrow. They are the future of this earth. Let us all join together to respect and acknowledge the First Nations so that we may walk forward together. Okay, so Ian, what do we have lined up for us today?
Well, we're onto the really exciting part of the program now. So one of the questions I get asked, and I've been visiting all of the schools, Jessie, is what do we do next? It's sort of like that video, and I've got to say, every time I watch that United Nations video on We've Got a Plan, I just get excited because I think, well, gee, we're part of this. And as I've visited all the schools and the students, what I've seen is some really amazing work at bringing together all of the key ingredients on building the plan. So what we're going to talk about today is exactly that, the final part of building the plan. And guess what? The really good news is 90% of the work is done.
That is good news.
Yep, I visited probably 3/4 of the schools now, and I'm just really impressed with what all of the students have done. So what we're going to do today is just talk about how we put the bricks together. So I call them bricks, and it's like building a mud brick house. If you're going to build a mud brick house, you've got to find out where you're going to put it, and you've got to design it, and then you've got to go and find all the stuff to make up the mud bricks. Once you've done all of that, and that's what takes all of the time, all you have to do then is put all of that stuff into the little brick containers, let it set, and that's what we're going to do now, and then you just build the house. So the easy part is building the bricks, and that's what we're going to talk about today. How to build those bricks. I've talked to probably over 120 students over the last couple of weeks, and everybody's pretty excited about building these bricks, because once we've built the brick, and each person in the team, and we've got a team, did you know, of almost 250 students across Australia.
250?
250. And each person builds their brick, and then we simply assemble those bricks, and that becomes our Young Australians Plan for the Planet. So today we're going to talk about brick building and how easy that is, and the fact that most of the work's done. Once we've built these bricks, we just assemble them and we've got the plan.
Wonderful. And then after you have a bit of a chat with us about how to put those bricks together, we're also going to watch the last video from Dr. Heather Robson from James Cook University. So she's going to take us through a little bit of how to prioritize what's the most important thing. So those videos last week were so helpful, and it'll be great to catch that last one today.
Fantastic, yeah. Dr. Heather Robson talks about choosing the priority areas. Now that's going to be important in building the brick because we need to make sure the bricks are going to do the right thing. And Dr. Robson is just great at talking about stories of how to actually prioritise. So yeah, all of it fits together, and then the last piece we've got to talk about at the very end is presenting all of this in Canberra. So that's going to happen as part of Science Week in August. So in the next couple of weeks we'll be finalising the plan and working out who's going to come across to Canberra to actually help present.
But we
Pretty
better talk
exciting.
about that at the end. Don't jump the gun now, because you have very important information to convey about how to actually get there, how to put the plans together, and reaching that finishing line. So I'm going to leave you all in Ian's capable hands.
Thank you, Jessie. Great. Well, let's talk about how to build the plan. What we need to do is a couple of simple things. The first part is really looking back at the work you've already done and starting to think about how to assemble that into a structure. Now, that's not that complicated, and as I said, you've already done most of the work. So let's have a look at what you've already done. But before I do that, I want to tell you a little bit of a story about the work I used to do and how it relates to what we're doing today. So I used to have to go and visit different countries in my old company, and my boss would say, Ian, will you pop across to Russia because the Russian business is not doing so well. And I've got to go across and fix that. Well, you can imagine that's a bit of a problem, because if I arrive in Russia and say, look, I'm from head office and I'm here to solve your problems, you can imagine that's not going to go down very well with the Russian team. So I didn't say that. What I used to say is, look, I know nothing about your business, but I bet you do. If you tell me all about how, in fact, you think we need to improve things, then I'll capture that in a simple plan, head office speak, and I'll take that back to head office and I'll explain it to them, and maybe we can get them to do the things that we need to do to actually improve things. Well, the Russian team were pretty happy with that, so they would then go through all the things that they thought were important. So you can see there's a little bit of a trick here. I didn't have to come up with anything. I just asked questions. Now, that's what you've been doing in the discovery phase. And that's why I'm saying you've done all the work. So the next part is fairly simple. So I'd ask them what the pieces were. I'd then, what the issues were, where the challenges were, what they actually needed a hand with. They would tell me, and what I would do is simply work with them to package it. Now that packaging I'd then take back, I'd have all of their ideas, take it back to head office, give it to my boss Howard, he won't mind you knowing that his name was Howard, and I'd say, Howard, this is what we need to do in Russia. It's not my thinking, this is what the Russian team have told me. So guess what? We do that and the business would turn around every time. So I got to go all sorts of interesting places like Italy and Australia and, where else did I go? Belgium, lots of different countries, because every time I went there and asked these questions and packaged it and took it back to the head office and they do what the team wanted there, guess what? The business would turn around. And we started to become very successful, or even more successful actually, and those countries were really happy because their business had gone well, and head office was happy because the overall business was going well. So there's a few little principles that we're using here that you've already done. The first one is ask questions. That's what the discovery phase was about. Now what you did then is capture a whole lot of things that were already happening or needed to happen. And what you did then was prioritize those into a set of, let me see, your discovery form. So remember your discovery form, over here you prioritized them in urgency and importance. Now what we're able to do there is then add those scores up, and that enables us to pick the important ones, because there's a really important rule that operates in business, and you can use this in anything, is basically if you tackle the top 20% of the challenges, then what happens is you actually hit 80% of the answers. Now, that's a bit of a rule of thumb, but it often works. So what we're doing is we've got lots and lots of things that are happening around Australia. Now that's exciting in itself because nobody has ever captured all of those things. But by you working in your area, in your student focus area, you've captured that. And so we've already got a picture of everything that's happening in Australia in the sustainability space. So we're already there with one important thing, but we're now taking it a step further. What we're doing is prioritizing those, and the way we do that is just the numbering system. So if you add them up, you'll get a score out of 20 and you just pick the top 4. Pretty easy? Not complicated. So you pick the top 4 of your priority areas, and that then is the areas we're going to focus on in building the plan. Got it? Pretty simple. So what I do is go back to head office and say, look, these are the important things we need to do. We do it, the business would turn around. And that's all we're doing here, using those same principles. But you're learning some really important lessons that you can take forward, you know, at school, but also once you move into your career. These are things that it took me a long time to learn. A lot of businesses took a long time to learn, but you're learning it really quickly just by doing these, building this plan. So the first thing we do is prioritize. You pick the top 4 areas. Now, I got a question when I was down in Tasmania. It was a pretty good question. What if there's 6, all with the same score? Now, I want to tell you about another really important principle that you'll learn as you are at school, as you go into your work, your career, and it's not often used. It's called use your noggin. Have a think. Okay? So if you've got 6, have a think about which ones you think are the most important. 4. You got that? So there's 6 of them, you choose. And don't ever underestimate your ability to choose the most important 4. Because you've already done the research. You're the expert in this area. So you can choose the most important 4. And then what we do is we're going to take those 4 and we're going to turn that into the bricks that we're going to build the plan from. So today I'm going to take you through a simple example that we developed when I was up with the team at Essington. Hi, team in Essington, in Darwin. And I'll just show you how easy this is. Now, if you look at the build form, the brick, you'll see that there's a number of key areas. Now, you'll see over on the left-hand side, actually that's your right-hand side. I'm looking at this in reverse. You'll see on the right-hand side, you've got the focus areas, and you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So you just put your 4 priority areas up there. Then you'll see objectives, strategies, actions, outcomes, SDG interconnects. Now that sounds really complicated, but it's not complicated. It's actually really quite simple. Once you understand what we're doing, and I'll show you an example, objectives are very simply what you're trying to achieve. Now, you've seen pop up on the screen now an example. Now this is an example we worked through when I was up in Darwin with the Essington team, because the Essington team was saying, okay, how do we translate this? So you can see on the right hand side, they are looking at, or the student I was talking to with the rest of the team was looking at poverty. And one of the things they'd identified was the issue of homelessness in the Darwin area. So they'd done some fantastic research and found out that 1 in 15 people in Darwin was homeless. Okay, so that was the work that was done. How do we translate that into the brick? Well, if we look at what our objective is there, well, we've got 1 in 15 people are homeless. Is that a good thing? Well, no, we decided that actually we'd like to improve on that. So what's the objective there? What are we trying to achieve? Well, we tossed this round with the team there, and the team decided that we'd like to reduce that. Well, how much do we want to reduce it by? So there's 2 ways of looking at that. You can go and look at some of the organisations that are dealing with homelessness and seeing if they're trying to reduce it, and if they are, by how much. But in this case, the students weren't aware of that. So we said, well, let's set an objective. And the objective they set was 50%. So let's try and reduce the number of homeless people in Darwin by 50%. Well, over what period? Well, the best period to always work within this is about 5 years, because it's close enough so that we can track it, and it's far enough away so that we've got time to make it happen. So our objective on that became, we want to reduce homelessness by 50% over the next 5 years. So we then started talking about what had been discovered about homelessness. What were some of the reasons? And 2 of the reasons that came up were a lack of education, and the second one was just a lack of sense of the future, a vision. Many of those people, they couldn't see a way out. So we talked about those as 2 strategies. Well, look, if we could improve education, then we could actually potentially bring some of these people out of that homeless state into a situation where they were much more able to move into accommodation, but also do all the other things that they would really like to in their life. So the education, you can see, is linked to vision. Now, we talked then about education and the other team who was looking at education and how we might be able to link some of those education services in with the people who are homeless and those organisations who looked after them. So that was the strategy. It was as simple as that. But there was a second one, which you probably noticed when I was talking about it, was vision. So there's a whole lot of psychology services out there and support services for people to actually help people vision where they'd like to be in their lives. So we talked about how we could potentially link some of those psychology services with some of the centres for homeless people to actually bring some psychologists or some support people in to help people vision where they'd actually like to be instead of on the streets, if that was their choice. And you can see how the strategies came out fairly simply from the work that had already been done. Well, who needs to do it? Well, that wasn't complicated because we'd already worked that out under the strategies. We need to link the people who have actually, are capable of doing the work in education with the centres that are looking after homeless people. So that becomes one of our actions. And the same with visioning. It's that simple. So you don't need to make this complicated. Just take the facts you've already got and just build them into this structure. Now, the important thing when you build a brick is that we need to know how successful that is going to be over the next 5 years. We need to measure that. And there's an old adage in management that if you can measure it, you can manage it. And you can see over under the outcomes that that links right back to our objective. So we want to achieve 50% reduction. That wasn't me coming up with that. That was one of the students who had looked at this area. And if we've got 5 years to do it, well, that's really easy in knowing how to measure that. We simply try and achieve 10% in the first year, 20% in the second, and you've guessed the rest. By 5 years, we've achieved 50%. That's our measure. And the reason we do that is because next year, when the students pick up your plan, because the idea is that with any business plan, that you develop the first structure, which we're doing at the moment, and then we hand that on to the next set of students, and they in fact take that and look at how things are working, whether this is successful. Now what we'll find is we'll know a result against that 10%, but we'll also know how those programs, those ideas we set up are working. So the idea of increasing education, increasing access to visioning capabilities. You with me? Really simple. And we'll then be able to work with the next team to say, okay, are there any other ideas which pop up which you think you can add to this strategy? So one of the things we're learning here is you're building the brick. Next year starts to take that brick and look at how we can actually improve that brick. Pretty simple? It's really simple. And then the last part you'll see over the far side is in fact SDG interactions, interconnectivities. Now the reason we've got this here is you'll notice there were two areas in there that link to other SDGs. One of them was education. So you might like to toss around some ideas with the education team on ways you could work together. And that's where the partnership team comes in. How could you work together to achieve your objective? But you'll notice there's others that link in. So just try and capture those over in the far corner, and that will give you an idea of other members of the team. Now, there's two secrets to how to take this forward, because you can sketch that out. And one of the questions I got was, look, we're pretty busy. We've got exams coming up. How long is this going to take? Now, the important message there is you've done most of the work. All you're doing, you can see, is just arranging that. So my guess is it'll take you an hour or two to fill in this form, which is your build summary form, and that's it. Pretty simple, but there's a few secret weapons that we've got to help you. The first one is you've already got a fantastic team in your school. So even though you might be looking at poverty and homelessness, what will be helpful, you'll find, is if you put your brick together and then share that around the other members of the team and get ideas from them about anything else they can think of. So you don't have to do this by yourself, it's your team. What we're going to do then is get everybody, the same way we loaded up the discovery summary forms onto the web, we're going to get you to load up your build summary form. So you'll be able to see what the guys in other schools and girls in other schools are actually coming up with under their areas. And you're allowed to borrow, share, use the forum to talk about ideas. So you can see what we're doing is very simple but very powerful, because we've now got 240 students across Australia all looking at the same challenges, all coming up with solutions and putting those into a very simple format that we can borrow and take ideas from. So this is all about sharing. So there's some really important lessons that you're learning while you're actually building these bricks. So I'm just going to walk you through those lessons. The first one is teaming. which I mentioned. This, you're learning how to actually work as a team. And that's the most important thing in actually building a plan. The second one is prioritization. You're learning how to take a lot of information and actually turning that into the important areas that you need to focus on. The third area is how to build. So you're learning how to take those areas and translate them into something that everybody can work from. Does that make sense? It's not complicated. And in fact, these lessons, if you take those and apply those to your schoolwork, once you start to get into your career, you'll find these very powerful. And you'll find that you'll be very successful. That's what happened for me. But you can see the principles are really simple. We're just taking some really simple ideas, we're applying them, and guess what? We're going to have, at the end of this, a plan for sustainability in Australia. So how are we going to build that? What are the next components of that? We simply take each of those bricks and we assemble them. So one of the questions I got from the teams is, how do we assemble them? Well, that's simple. We take a stapler, we take the 12 build discovery forms and we staple them together. And guess what? You've got your EcoZone sustainability plan. Pretty simple, yeah? And you've got a business planner who's going to staple them together. It's that simple. Now, we'll probably put together with you a little summary sheet that'll go on the front of that, and that will then become your EcoZone sustainability plan, and it'll have everybody's names on it, and it'll have a little bit of background on your school and how you put this together, and we've got the plan. And that will then transfer to the next year's students, and they'll be able to see two things. One, the ideas you came up with, whether they can come up with any other ideas, and they can also start checking on your measures as to how well we're going on implementing that. Pretty exciting, pretty simple. And then what we're going to do when we compile into the national plan, we're going to take those 20 plans, because we've got about 20 schools around Australia doing this for all the eco-zones, and guess what? There'll be lots of similarities and overlaps. And we're going to work with students who are interested to actually, what we call, synthesize those, bring those together, find all those common parts into a national plan that captures all of that. So we'll then have a build summary form for each area. We'll put those together. That will become your EcoZone plan. And then we'll put those together, and that will become the National Sustainable Development Plan. Not complicated, is it? It's actually very simple. And I was really encouraged during the last couple of weeks to just see how excited all of the students are at finishing this, and not realizing that they'd actually done all of the work already. All it was now assembling it, and then we build that into the EcoZone plan, and we build that into the national plan. And then a group of students will come to Canberra and present that to the politicians in Canberra. That's pretty exciting. And that's like taking it back to head office and saying, okay, this is what we need to do. And guess what? Because it's all driven from the people who are on the ground and know what needs to happen, you guys, then the results will be just the same as Russia and Italy. We'll be well on the road to achieving sustainability in Australia. So, it's pretty simple. That's all you need to do for the next step. We're going to aim to finish those probably around about end of May, beginning of June, at least, to get up the drafts onto the website so other students can see them. And then over the June period, we'll aim to then compile those and tidy them up, making sure they, let me see, they look great. Because when we present this in Canberra, we want to make sure that the plan looks fantastic, and that's our job and the university's jobs to help make sure that what you've come up with looks absolutely brilliant for when it's presented. Sound like fun? Well, that's what everybody's been saying around the country, and today I wanted to just capture it on video so that you could see and come back to this if you need to check. So once you've done your first, let me see, strategy objectives, just repeat that process for the other 4 or for the other 3, so you have all 4 of them done, and that's your brick, and that's what we'll actually assemble into the national plan. So I've checked out with everybody else. They reckon this is pretty straightforward. They can do it. I know you can too, and I really look forward to working with you to then helping build those bricks and making the national plan. So, Jessie, how does that sound? Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes lots of sense, and it sounds much simpler than I thought it was going to be. When I heard about this project, I thought it sounded really complicated and really difficult, but when you put it like that, it really does sound quite simple. And it's such a powerful project. I remember when I was in high school, I had all these ideas about what the important things that we should be fixing in our area were, but I had no way to communicate them. So this is such a great opportunity for young people to be able to pick what they think are priorities in their areas and present them to people who will actually listen, which is so amazing.
It is, and it's a really important point, Jessie, because one of the questions I get asked when I visit the schools is, why will people listen to us as students? And the answer I give is because students are in fact the future. So you are the generation that will be inheriting the future, and you really need to be the ones designing that. And if I sort of asked somebody, say from business, to come up with a sustainable development approach for Australia, and they do, then I'm going to be questioning, hold it, they've probably got a business objective or a business agenda sitting behind this. And if I ask somebody from government to come up with it, I'll think, well, how objective are they? So whenever something's presented, everybody will be asking, what's the motivation here? And the beauty of working with students is your only motivation is a great future for Australia and for the planet. So one of the other things I haven't mentioned actually, but we've already had a whole lot of approaches from other countries about doing this in their countries as well. So the students who are doing all of this work now not only can be working with the students next year as mentors, if they want to, but also potentially as ambassadors to other schools.
It's so
around
important.
the world.
So important that Australia is leading the way, and you out there watching this, you are leading the way with this project. But we better get a move on because we're quickly running out of time, and we still have a video to watch from Dr. Heather Robson. So, would you like to introduce the video?
Look, I will. One of the things you need to do is prioritise. You've got that little table that you'll be able to pick the winning scores on, your top 4. However, if you need to use your noggin and think about which ones you want to prioritise, Heather has some great tips. So have a look at the video, and she's really helpful on this in terms of working out where you can really make a difference.
Okay, welcome back to part 3. So in part 3, I wanted to actually talk to you about how we as a university can help you find the resources that you need to write your report or your plan. Now, this is by no means meant to be an exhaustive list of things, but what I wanted to do in this section is just put you in touch with some of the key resources that you may not be aware of that are available within your region. So there are just 3 things that I'd like to highlight in this particular section. The first of these is this State of the Tropics report, and it was put together in 2014, but it actually started earlier than that in 2011, where a group of research institutions came together and they wanted to address, they wanted to address, put together a report, a comprehensive report addressing the environmental, social, and economic indicators to see if they could answer the question, is life in the tropics getting better? So in this report, it's divided into two main sections, or the report findings are divided into two main sections, the ecosystem and the human system. So the ecosystem is based around things like the atmosphere, the oceans, land and water, and biodiversity. Then in the human side, it deals with issues around society and economy, poverty, health, education, gender equality, those sorts of things. So many of the things some of you are addressing in your plans. This data that was used to generate this report came from a variety of different sources like the World Bank, IMF, United Nations, UNESCO. But the big thing to think about here is that the analysis that's done is descriptive, high level, so this sort of report will give you a long-term regional trend. So what's happening in the big picture in your particular area. So just to give you a quick, because it's quite a big report, so just to give you a quick look at what it sort of looks like. Here's one that was done for Oceania, so for Pimlico, this would be your section. So they have key points, and in this sort of area, we'll have lots of different facts and figures, things that came out as being issues in that particular region, and then if you look at the graph or you look at the figure, you can see what area it actually relates to. Another big thing that I wanted to raise your awareness on is about the university, James Cook University. So we are a university in the tropics for the tropics. We have 3 tropical campuses, one in Townsville, one in Cairns, and one in Singapore. So JCU has a strategic intent, and that is to really create a brighter future for life in the tropics by producing graduates and discoveries that make a difference in the world. Now, many people, universities are large places, and so it can be overwhelming when you look at this from the outside, but our university is divided into 2 main parts, or academies. The first academy is focused mainly around tropical health and medicine, so public health, vet services, medicine, dentistry, healthcare services, those sorts of things. And the other main one is called Tropical Environments and Societies. So this is where the Science and Engineering College is housed, things around business, law, governance, art, society, and education. So that might help you when you're, as a student, navigating the JCU website, if you're familiar with those 2 big academies. Another thing that I find many high school students and many of the general public are not aware of is, in addition to training students at a university, we also engage in a lot of research. And so we have research centers and institutes that are actually housed on campus at the different university campuses. So some of the ones, and this is not by any means an exhaustive list, we have some national centers of excellence within Australia. So you're probably familiar with the ARC Center of Excellence for Coral Reef Studies. But there are also centers around prevention of chronic conditions in rural and remote populations. If you look at some of our institutes and research centers, we have the Cairns Institute, based obviously in Cairns, and the Center for Tropical Biodiversity and Climate Change. Now today I'm only going to walk you through 2 of these centers and some of the research things that they do, but all of the information for these centers and research institutes is located on the web, so you can find them for yourselves as well. So the first one I wanted to talk about is the Cairns Institute. So the research that's addressed in the Cairns Institute is around issues of social and environmental transformation in the tropics. So their whole point is to be a visionary approach with this multidisciplinary sort of focus to look at principles around social justice and reciprocity. They have 8 main themes, and the Cairns Institute is really aiming to provide innovative research within a local, national, and global application. They have 8 main research themes, and I'm not going to go into them in great detail, but I'll just quickly touch on what they are so you know if you have one of the plans that addresses one of these areas that you can go in and find information in this area. So they have a whole theme around governance and political innovations. looking at things between government and non-government sectors. There's a whole one around education and capacity building. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, looking at issues across health, education, employment, housing, law, justice, language, and culture. There's one around regional and economic development, social justice and community well-being, sustainable international development. So how well is Australia working with its neighbors in the Asia-Pacific region to meet international sustainability development goals? There's a whole one, remember, touching back on that stuff around urbanization and building cities. So a whole thing around tropical planning, resource development, and design. Then another center is the ARC Center of Excellence in Coral Reef Studies. They have three main programs. The first one is mainly around people and ecosystems, and within that they have research themes as well. So there's one around social adaptation, resilience, and transformation, looking at, in particular, things like climate change, overfishing. They do a lot of work around land-sea planning, so how human activities around the coastal areas influenced in that particular area. There's another program around ecosystem dynamics, looking at the past, the present, and the future. So how resilient are particular ecosystems and coral reefs in those sorts of areas? They look at disease spread, introduction of new species, invasive species, those sorts of things. And their third program is around responding to a changing world. So this looks at some of the capacity of coral reefs to respond to both local and global drivers and stressors. So this has been in the news a lot. You'll be hearing a lot in those sorts of particular spaces. So as I pointed out before, this is not by any means meant to be an exhaustive list, but what I wanted to stress to you as students is that I may not know all the answers, we may not know all the answers, but we have a whole network of dedicated and passionate academics that are really looking forward to working together with you to help put together your plan for the planet. So we hope you have a wonderful journey in this, and we're here and ready whenever you're ready for us. So thank you very much, and I look forward to being in touch with you.
Some great advice there from Heather. Hey.
Yeah, so basically each of the bricks are really simple, but we wanted to give that insight into what's there if you want to go a little bit deeper. So that's an example from James Cook working with the team right across the north of Australia. So if any of those teams want to find out more in building their bricks, they can actually go back to the universities and link in with them. James Cook, Charles Darwin. Same with the universities down south, we'll say. You can link in with your local university, but that's only if you want to find out more, you really want to delve in. The main thing to remember from today is you've actually done most of the work already. You can build your brick if you want to get into it a little bit more deeply, then you can link up with the university, and our team's there to support you to do that. But if you simply want to do it from the work you've already done, then that's absolutely perfect. And having been around and worked with all the teams over the last couple of weeks, I know we've got all the answers there. We just need to assemble these bricks and then put the plan together. How exciting.
How exciting indeed. Something that I think would be a little bit difficult though is working out what the objective is, like how to set a measurable objective. Say, in the example we went through before, it was 50% reduction in homelessness. But I imagine working in with the universities could be a good way to find out what some of those measurable objectives is. Is that right?
Well, yeah, look, it's a really good point, Jessie. So part of the reason for Heather showing those different reports, etc., is to say some people will probably have already done half of the work for you if you want to set that. So a quick question to say, look, do we have some objectives already in this area? Couple of places to find that out. The local council, all of the local councils have been contacted across Australia, and they already know you're working on this. So they obviously, or sometimes, will have objectives. But it's back to using your noggin. As we saw with that simple example, if there's a problem area, 1 in 15 people homeless, feel free to set an objective that makes sense to you. Over the next 5 years, 50% reduction. So it's only complicated if you think, how can I work that out? Often in business, in any situation, it's a matter of making a decision, saying, I think this sounds sensible, putting it down, and then the strategies and actions help you start to work out how to get there. And once you've got that, even though the objective might have been a little bit low, sometimes you'll overachieve it, or a bit high, you're actually on the path. And then you can fine-tune it. The next year can fine-tune. So don't feel uncomfortable with you making a decision. You've done the work, make a decision, put the objective in, work out some strategies to achieve it, and you will have contributed in a very big way to actually helping us put in place a plan for sustainability in your area that will build into the National Sustainability Development Plan.
How exciting. So it's up to you, everyone out there. This is your opportunity to set those goals, to make those decisions, and to put your priorities down in those bricks, which is really, really exciting. Okay, so that brings us to pretty much the end of today's session, but we should talk about what's coming up next.
Well, the next exciting part is the trip to Canberra, making sure that we get our plans in front of the people who can help support making them happen. So that's what we'll be talking about next time, and we're looking at some fundraising activities that we'll let you know about over the web to actually look at how we can start to get the resources together to get people to Canberra to actually present the report. So that's the next instalment. I won't go into too much detail, but you'll get that through the web, and we look forward to that part because that's going to be the really fun part.
Absolutely, and I'm so excited to meet everyone and see people present their ideas. Oh, it's going to be great these next couple of months, very exciting. But other than that, I think that brings us to the end of today. Did you have any final words, Ian?
Well, the final word came from one of the students when I was travelling around, and she said, I didn't ever feel like I had a voice in the future. And being involved in Young Australians Plan for the Planet, now I feel like I have. So use your voice, put your bricks together, and we're looking forward to a really fun couple of months coming up.
Absolutely. All right, we'll see you all next time.
Thanks, Jessie.
Thank you, Ian.